Alright guys, so recently some news came out about Drake and not enough people are talking about it because if this is true, this will damage his career forever. I'm talking more damaging than any PDF file allegation that Kendrick can throw at Drake on his next album. This will have a much worse impact on his overall legacy within hip-hop, but ultimately it could be very fake news, so I want you to take this with a grain of salt. This channel isn't typically devoted to documenting different rumors or gossip, but I haven't seen anyone on YouTube cover this, so I want to bring the facts to you guys and let you decide whether this is true or false or leaves any impact on Drake's legacy. So essentially the allegation is that Drake's diss song Push Ups was written by someone else. Now to some people this might not come as too much of a shock just based off the fact that we've gotten tons of reference tracks leaked within Drake's camp. I mean, just this year alone we got Lil Yachty's reference track for Drake's song Jumbotron Poppin'. We got Party Next Door's reference track for his song Ratchet Happy Birthday. And the one that was the most damaging was Bori's diss track for Drake's song Mob Ties. Now, the reason why this was so damaging is because that song was meant to document a personal point in Drake's career where he was battling Pusha T, and it was basically his response to that entire beef. And while it wasn't the most lyrically charged track, people were still disappointed that a song with bars so related to Drake's current situation was basically just copy-pasted by another artist. There was no originality, it was basically another rapper rapping from Drake's perspective, which really just eliminates that essence of what makes a great rapper, which is basically that you're writing stories of your own personal experience. If other people are writing your experience for you, then it's much harder to take you serious as a top MC in the game. And allegedly now this Push-Ups track, which was Drake's first response to Kendrick's initial diss on Like That, where he's basically going at Kendrick, Metro Boomin, Future, Rick Ross, basically the entire game really. It's alleged that this song was not written by Drake at all and was actually given to him as a reference track originally. Now let me give you a little bit of context here. If you guys don't remember, that Push-Ups track was actually not first released by Drake. It was leaked on a Saturday morning, and that leaked version had a completely different beat. It had a whole different verse from Drake, and his rapping delivery was a lot more laid back. The mixing of his vocals was also very, very poor. Now, because of how bad the mixing on his vocals was and how unfinished the song truly sounded, a lot of people were very confused on whether or not this was just a leaked song that maybe he was still working on since it sounded so unfinished, or if it was just AI. Like, people thought someone else recorded this track from Drake's perspective and put Drake's vocals on it as a troll, essentially. And if you guys were keeping up with the beef, this actually happened several times throughout it, where people would record their own diss song, put Drake or Kendrick vocals on it, and it would leak on the internet and no one would know if it was a real song or AI. And this Push-Ups leak was what started that entire trend of people just not being 100% sure whether it was a real song or someone just recording with Drake or Kendrick vocals. Drake later kind of made fun or referenced this trend when he put Tupac vocals on his song Tailor Made Freestyle, where he was basically antagonizing Kendrick to come release his own diss song. But where it gets interesting is that only 2 hours after that first version of Push-Ups leaked, Drake officially released the real version. He sent it to Akademiks. Akademiks premiered it on his stream. And again, it featured a completely different beat. The vocals were mixed properly. Everything sounded a lot crispier. It sounded like it came from an actual studio. Now, it would have been very weird for Drake to have initially leaked the record, especially the unfinished version, right? Like, the only reason why he would leak his own diss record is to basically get an idea of how the public would react to it. And if the public perception was positive, then he would release it officially. And if the public perception was negative, then he would not release it or claim it to be real. But even if he were to leak his own diss record, wouldn't he leak the finished version? Why would he leak a completely unfinished version? So this is where it gets interesting, and again, bear with me, because the sources are not the most reliable, but the narratives line up. Basically, someone by the name of Playa posted on Discord saying the following. He said, the leaked version of Push-Ups was actually leaked by someone from Drake's team, either someone within OVO or someone who helped write it. The Drake vocals on this version of Push-Ups were completely composed by AI, and this is why Drake's vocals sounded slightly robotic on it. The writing is real, however, and the song was in fact written by Drake with the help of writers, in the sense that Drake likely gave a couple of lines or ideas of what to write to his writers like he normally does. This version ended up being AI though, because after the brainstorming phase, the writers made an AI reference track for the song. Drake's reference tracks nowadays are written out first and then made with AI. And this is done to hide the fact that it was written by others, with the writer's actual reference track being deleted, so only the Drake AI reference track remains. Now again, this came from Discord, so it's posted anonymously, and there's no actual validity to the credibility of the source. Bear with me because I'm going to explain why this could potentially be true, and regardless, think about all of the hate over the last 10 years that Drake has gotten specifically for having ghostwriters. And when AI music started making that big wave about a year ago, it first exploded by someone using Drake vocals to make their own track. Drake has been the biggest target of AI, and it only makes sense logically to hide any sort of reference tracks from leaking in the future and damaging his legacy by people basically hearing a hit Drake song completely written and sung by someone else. Because of how advanced Drake AI vocals have gotten specifically, right? Because it was Drake and Kanye West who were really the biggest targets of their vocals being used on AI records. And because of how much public scrutiny Drake's gotten for all these reference tracks being leaked, it does make sense from an operations perspective that they would have any sort of ghostwriters or just writers in general lay down a reference track using Drake's vocals. There's a lot of benefits. You're basically hiding the fact that it was not Drake that wrote the song, and Drake is able to kind of more vividly see what the song would sound like once he records it, since his vocals will already be on the track. And beyond this just being a calculated move from an operations perspective within Drake's business, it's also congruent with how rough and robotic the vocals were on that original version of Push Ups that came out. The guy who posted this on Discord also alleges that this is another reason why Kendrick rapped the line on Euphoria saying, "Am I battling ghosts or AI?" Because basically the Push Ups record was an AI track that was written by Drake's ghostwriters. Now again, this could be complete speculation, complete cap, and I wouldn't do a video on this if this is the only proof that we had. If I just scroll by this post on Discord, I'd pay it no mind and I would not come to YouTube with clickbait telling you guys that, Drake's career could be destroyed forever. What's very interesting is we heard the exact same story being told by a rapper by the name of Glasses Malone. Now, if you guys don't know who Glasses Malone is, he's an LA rapper, dropped some big mixtapes in the early 2000s. But what's interesting is he was actually signed to Cash Money in 2011. Now, Cash Money is the home of the Young Money label, which is where Drake was signed to in 2011 and for years after that. And it's the label he dropped his If You're Reading This It's Too Late mixtape on, which was his project where I believe we've heard at least 5 reference tracks off of it. So basically Glasses Malone was signed to the same label that Drake was signed to, and while they never necessarily worked together, it's very possible that Glasses got an inside look at the ins and outs of the operation within the label and how they actually use and work with different writers or ghostwriters if they're uncredited and just paid under the table. So it's safe to say his opinion is a lot more credible, at least, than the random post on Discord. But I want to make it clear that he's also speculating. It's just very strange how both his story and the story on Discord line up very similarly. So again, Glasses was signed to Cash Money, and he's known for in the past saying that Drake is rap, he isn't hip-hop. He makes this claim basically due to the fact that Drake uses writers for some of his biggest songs, and as someone who was signed to the same label as Drake, again, it's very possible that he has some sort of inside knowledge on how Drake or maybe other Cash Money artists worked with writers in the past. So Glasses did an interview recently where he gave an interesting take on the entire beef, basically stating that Drake probably never really wanted to be in this beef, but he kind of got pressured into it. And once he saw that positive reaction that the fans were giving him to push-ups, that's what motivated him to keep going and engage in it full on, which makes a lot of sense, right? The record leaked, Push-Ups leaked, the fans heard it, it got a positive reception. People didn't know if it was AI, but people liked it. It didn't get a bad reception. Then 2 hours later, Drake goes on to release the official version. So then he goes on to talk about how the original version of Push-Ups that dropped, the mixing and the vocals just sounded really rough and robotic. He then goes on to say that he thinks a writer released the song, and he speculates that basically it was likely written by a writer and recorded with Drake AI vocals to get his inflections correctly, the way that they think Drake should record the track. They think they then sent Drake the AI version of the song that they wrote and recorded, basically saying the same thing as that Discord post stated, that essentially Drake's writers wrote the track and only recorded it using Drake AI vocals and then sent it to Drake, and in between that entire process, someone leaked that original version that they had sent to Drake before he recorded his own version. He goes on to say that he knows the quality of work that guys like 40 or Boy Wonder put into the overall production of music that they release, which is valid because, again, he was signed to Cash Money. He probably had direct access to working with or seeing how these guys worked. And he said that OG version of Push-Ups would have never sounded like that if it was actually mixed by 40 or produced by Boy Wonder. And on the credits, that's exactly what it says. It's mixed by 40 and produced by Boy Wonder. So Glasses is basically stating that the original version of Push-Ups had to have come from someone else. It couldn't have been from Drake's camp because it never would have sounded so robotic, so unfinished, so emotionless, and the mixing would have never been at the quality that it was. So again, take this with a grain of salt because it's very possible that Glasses Malone has, with his history of kind of criticizing Drake's legacy within hip-hop, possibly just has some ulterior incentive to start rumors about Drake or try to damage his reputation. It's very possible. But what's much less likely is the fact that Glasses Malone took the time out of his day to scroll through Discord to find this post that alleges that Drake had ghostwriters put his AI vocals on this diss track and then send it to Drake, and then repeat that same story acting like it was his own on a podcast. Like, I don't think Glasses Malone is taking the time out of his day to start scrolling through the internet to try to find some rumor about Drake and then just repeat it. Especially since he, again, used to be signed to the label that Drake was on and probably saw a lot of how those guys operated. The most likely scenario is that he's just kind of speculating or theorizing based off what he's seen in the past and what he knows from being within the music industry and how they leverage AI with other artists, and basically just assumes that this is the most likely case scenario as to why we got that leaked version of Push Ups originally and why it sounded so rough. But with all that, if this ends up being true, where does that leave Drake's legacy in terms of his skills as a battle rapper, but just really more so as a rapper in general, right? Because we already know that he's had a lot of his hit songs written by other individuals. But two things we've always assumed came from Drake directly were A, his timestamp records, where he gets more kind of personal and introspective, and his diss track records, where he's gone, toe-to-toe against guys like Common, Meek Mill, Pusha T, and now Kendrick, a lot of lyrical giants. And some of these battles, he's actually come out on the winning side. So say what you want about him having help with his R&B records or maybe some of his club anthems, but we've always given Drake that respect that when it comes time to battle, he steps up to the plate. When it comes time to give us those more personal tracks, he always delivers with a timestamp record. We've always held him in that regard. So if it turns out that this entire time he was having a team of writers helped him craft these diss songs, and forget about the fact that he pretty much unanimously lost to both Kendrick Lamar and Pusha T, the fact that his participation within this beef, all of the ideas, the bars, the disses that came from him could have potentially be written by someone else, just completely adds a stain to his legacy in a magnitude that we haven't seen before in his entire career. And again, it doesn't seem completely out of the realm of possibilities that this is really the case. When Kendrick first dropped his diss against Drake on Like That, Drake seemed very passive about it. He was just posting captions on Instagram where he was kind of trolling the entire thing. He never responded to it directly. We were very uncertain on whether or not he was actually going to engage in the beef. But once that Push Ups record leaked, he was 10 on 10 focused on this beef. We got Tailor Made Freestyle a week later. Like, he was very, very active in making sure that he was going to go toe-to-toe against Kendrick. He was even trolling Kendrick's team on Instagram that entire time between Push Ups and Euphoria. So it's very possible that maybe he was hesitant to actually partake in this beef. He didn't know how he should actually approach it. And once Push Ups leaked and the fans loved it, that gave him that energy or that confidence that he felt like he could go toe-to-toe against Kendrick and win in the fans' eyes. Plus, it's very strange that some random rapper who used to be signed to the same label as Drake is now saying this whole story, theorizing that Drake probably had some sort of AI ghostwriter craft this diss song. And at the same time, we get this Discord post which basically tells a very similar story. Now, as far as Drake's next move, he's been in Houston recently, wearing a lot of cowboy hats. He was recently shooting a video, allegedly, with a bunch of horses in the background. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he ventures off into some sort of slight variation of country music. We've already seen country artists like Morgan Wallen team up with rappers like Lil Durk or Moneybagg Yo, and even making an appearance in one of Drake's recent music videos. And with Drake's very consistent pattern historically of working with artists or incorporating sounds that are very hot at the moment, I could definitely see him venturing off into this lane, considering country music right now is at like an all-time high in terms of popularity. And he kind of needs to take a little break from hip-hop if we're being honest, right? Like, Kendrick Lamar did this great job at painting the narrative that the culture that Drake has tried to attach himself to for so long is tired of seeing him at the top. And if this does turn out to be true and he really did have ghostwriters write these diss songs and then use AI vocals to cover up the fact and basically remove any trace or possibility of a reference track ever leaking, I think that would cause irreparable damage to Drake's actual reputation within hip-hop and how hip-hop fans view him. And at that point, he'd be better off just taking Kendrick Lamar's advice when he says, I like Drake with the melodies, I don't like Drake when he acts tough. Stick to dance music, stick to country music if that's the new venture that you're going into, and don't try to proclaim yourself as one of the best rappers in the game, because with countless reference tracks leaking and the possibility of some of his more personal or at least competitive records being potentially written by someone else completely, shows that he lacks the authenticity in his penmanship that has made guys like Kendrick Lamar or anyone who came before Drake great MCs. What do you guys think? Is there any possibility that this is actually true, that he had ghostwriters on this diss track? Go back and listen to that original version. Look up Drake Push Ups original version. You'll find it on YouTube. You can listen to it for yourself. It sounds very robotic, That's why everyone was confused on whether or not it actually was AI vocals or not. I personally don't think we'd be getting two separate stories from two different sources that seem so similar, especially considering one is actually involved with the label Drake is signed on and knows the ins and outs of the music industry. I don't think we'd be getting such similar stories from these two sources if there wasn't some sort of realm of possibility where this was true. But honestly, at this point, with the quality of damage control that Drake's team is able to do, I don't think we'll ever know for sure if this is true or not. But you better believe that if there's any news on the topic, I'll be the first one to report it here. So make sure you're subscribed, like this video if you stuck with me till the end, drop a comment on whether or not you think this affects Drake's legacy or if it's true at all. And I will catch you guys in the next one.